Welcome to the Honest Business Podcast. This is the show for ambitious, value-driven business owners who are actively building a business that works for them. Hi, I'm May James, and I'm here to make scaling your business easier and more rewarding than ever. Each week, we will dive into simple, sustainable strategy and pragmatic leadership discussion to support you as you take imperfect action on your entrepreneurial journey. If you want to stay ahead, exceed your growth goals, and have a purposeful, thriving business, then keep on listening. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. I hope you are very well. Thank you for listening and for tuning back in. Really appreciate it. Today we are going to talk about vision and long-term strategy in business and the importance of it and how it is interlinked and what that means for you, because I think this is something that people get very confused about at all stages of business, and it can get very heavy and a lot more complicated than it needs to be. So today we're going to dive straight in and let's talk about vision and long-term strategy. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was what the two mean in terms of how are they linked. So your vision is very separate from your long-term strategy, and your vision is the overarching thing that kind of rules your business of what is your vision. Now, what I would like to say is you can have a vision for your life and a vision for your business, and they can be two different things. Inevitably, they'll be similar, but I think sometimes we get really confused of like, is it a personal vision or is it the business vision? So what is really important here is for you to think about, you know, your life and how big the business wants to get and what do you want that to be. Because if you are a kind of digital nomad and you are just kind of wanting to be a freelancer and stuff, and that's fine. Like, I think there's such a conversation around growing these huge businesses, and it really doesn't need to be. Like, if that is what you want to do, go for it. If you want to just, you know, make enough money so that you can survive and live a happy, lovely life and have everything you want, like, nobody is here to say to you that that is not enough. I'm sick of hearing that. It does my head in, and I'm trying not to swear on these episodes in case you have children and you are listening to this. So I'm trying really hard not to swear. If you know me, you know that I do swear a lot, and I'm sick of it. It's not okay. So if whatever the size business you want, whether that's you want to make, you know, 15 grand a year or you want to make 10-15 million a year, what I would say to you is you've got to have a vision regardless. And for some of you, the vision might be one thing, but if you are going for, you know, a really decent big business, then you might need to have two separate visions. I'd encourage everyone to have two separate visions, but I know sometimes it can be very intertwined. So your vision is as big as you need to make it. It's whatever is in your head that's telling you. It's the thing that you sometimes don't listen to, the intuition that you have but you're not allowing to come through. It's the dream that you have in your head that you don't think's possible. The fact it's in your head means that it is possible and it is open to you, and you probably deserve it and need it and want it. And so I want to give you permission today to really start thinking about, this vision thing, this is like a big thing and I need to go there. This episode, I don't think we can really, delve into vision. We could have a whole episode. There could be 10 episodes on vision. But it's ultimately about you deciding what you want and also looking at what does that mean for you, and then also the people around you, because many of us, especially if you're a woman listening to this, are so kind of intrinsically driven through other people. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. I just think it's important we recognise it and let it sit and just let it be, and also think about it when it comes into your vision. So you have a vision. Your long-term strategy is different from your short-term strategy, and it's different from your marketing strategy and your sales strategy and all of these other things. And for those of you who don't know me, I am just a strategy geek, obsessive lover. That is my job. I help people with strategy. I help them create strategy, write strategy, implement strategy, review strategy, the whole shebang. I'm like the strategy obsessed person. So for me, your long-term strategy is a real North Star. It's a real guiding force, and many people don't have it. Many people think they have it, and they don't. It's also important to recognise that a strategy and a plan are two separate things, which I know gets confused a lot. So when we talk about long-term strategy, this is really about the ultimate thing that's going on in your business and the direction and how you're getting there, and what the route and the path is and the activities that's going to happen to get you there. And the long-term strategy can be a really hefty piece of work. It can be a long-term thing. People come and work with me for a day, or they come and work with me for 6 months to try and really work out what the long-term strategy is. So don't stress that in this episode, by the end of it, you maybe don't have it all figured out, because that's not going to happen. It's very unlikely you can in that time. And many of you will already have a long-term strategy, but you're toying with it, you're wondering whether it's the right strategy, you're kind of, adding bits to it, taking things away. That's all fine. It's okay. It's normal. But the vision and the long-term strategy are linked because you can't have one without the other. So if you don't have a clear vision, I can't help you make a long-term strategy. And I've seen this before. People come to me and, we all want to chuck money at a problem and think it's going to fix it, right? So people will come, chuck a load of money and be like, May, come on, let's help me with this. Let's do this. And when I get into it, if they don't fully know what the vision is, I can't do my job, because I can't give someone, well, I can give them it, but it's not going to be right for them, right? It would be a disservice for me. So I can't give someone a strategy if I know that actually it's not really the one, because the vision is not linked. So first of all, you've got to have a vision in order to create a long-term strategy. But the other thing you've got to be able to do is your long-term strategy has to feed the vision, and that's where I don't see it match up a lot. So often people will come to me and maybe they have a long-term strategy and then they have a vision, but they're not gonna get each other. They don't mash together. They don't give each other joy. They don't bring kind of purpose to what they're doing. And so some of you will be running along this plan and a strategy that isn't gonna get you to where you want to be. The biggest thing I see with this as an example is, and I touched on before, about having long-term strategy and short-term strategy. Many people's long-term strategy is actually their short-term strategy, but then they view it and the way they action it and the way they spend their time on it as if it's the long-term strategy. That's incorrect, because what happens is you then make decisions from the wrong place. And what I want to stress to you today is that this whole idea of long-term strategy is all about your decision making. That's what it comes down to. It helps you to guide decisions so that it doesn't take you a long time. If I don't have a long-term strategy, it takes me ages in my business to do anything. If I have a clear strategy, it's like, okay, yeah, where's the data? How do I make data-driven decisions, which is maybe something we should do a podcast episode on. And then how does the decision that I'm going to take affect the long-term strategy? Does it fit? Does it not? So when you are kind of thinking about your long-term strategy, it's really important that you lean into this idea that it's okay if it changes. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but it does have to match what I want my life to look like in 5-10 years' time. Long-term strategy is not about 1 year's time. And as much as I love helping people with strategy that's more immediate, and that is, the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next 12 months, we have to have the longer term strategy in place in some format in order for the other strategy to make sense. And when I touched on before about, I think people use short-term strategy and they think it's their long-term strategy, is that many people are making a decision based on an offer in that product suite. Let's just think about it as an example. And they take that example and they create it and they run with it and they make it around the fact of selling an amount of sales that is their short-term strategy. So maybe in 1 year, you want to have 100 people through this. Let's just say it's a program, for example, a course or something. So they create this offer so that it will fit and mold around that amount of people. But what they don't and they fail to look at is, what is that going to look like when you hit the 5-year goal, which maybe is to have 500 people going through it a year? And if it's 500 people going through it a year and you've made it for 100 people a year, it inevitably doesn't work. And that's what happens a lot. And, whilst I'm not saying you should go out and create these huge, massive offers that inevitably are going to burn you out before you've even sold them, I'm not suggesting that, because it's bad, it's not good. But what I am saying is you need to be really clear when you're making decisions of, am I making this from a data-driven decision, and is it for the long-term strategy or is it for the short-term strategy? And that's fine if you are going for the short term. That's okay. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying you have to be really clear with yourself and your team, and depending on how big the business already is, really affects you in the decision making of this. So get really clear on it. Now, the next thing to think about is what to do if you struggle with your vision, because some people really, really struggle with it. Like, they really struggle, and it's okay if that's you and you're sat there thinking, I just want to be successful and I'm not really sure what else that means. That's okay. Some people have very clear vision of, where they want to live and how each day is going to be, and what they look out from their dream house and what they're going to see and all that kind of stuff. And that's amazing. If you can have that clarity, that is a beautiful gift, and it's really important. But if you struggle with that, don't let that be the reason to not do it and not to kind of go into this work, because your vision can be as simple as you make it. Yes, if you can channel into what that would look like on all aspects, and using the senses can be really great. So what can you hear, what can you feel, what can you see, that kind of, all of those things. What can you touch, what can you taste, that sort of thing can really help you go into it. And I'd say spend time. Like, if some people feel like they don't get their vision, but they haven't actually spent any time doing it. So there's a difference between that, and then there's a difference between people who actually struggle. And I think it's important we recognize the people that actually struggle, because many business development people don't, and it doesn't sit well with me, because for whatever reason you may struggle. I know some people who are neurodiverse, and that is me, but I don't struggle necessarily with this, but some people who are neurodiverse really struggle with this long-term vision. And so I just want to say I see you and I hear you if that is you and you feel like vision's never really connected with you because you feel like your brain doesn't allow you to go there. You're not weird, you're not unusual, that's okay. Like, there's many people out there who also feel the same. I've had clients who feel the same, and it's just you approach it in a different way and you look more tangibly at things. Sometimes people struggle with the untangible, and so really leaning into, what is, what does it look like for you to feel peace, rather than looking at the materialistic things. Because sometimes I think often this vision gets very like, what are you wearing, and how much is the house, and what car are you driving? But for me, I'd ask you to think about, how do you live your most peaceful life? How do you live your most fulfilled life? What fills your cup up on a regular basis? Because those are the things that pull from people what they actually are wanting to say, but they don't know how to say it. And so if you are working on your vision right now, really think about, where is it that business can really elevate your life rather than detract from it? Because some people are building visions where even if they hit their vision, their business is controlling their life. And that's not the goal, right? Like, it really doesn't need to be the goal. You can build a business and design a business around your vision in your life. But if you do it the other way around and you build a business and then kind of chuck your life onto it and hope that it's going to be a match made in heaven, it inevitably never really is. So I'd really kind of encourage you to think about your life and then the vision for your business being, what does that mean for other people? I think as well, sometimes we bring other people into it too soon. So when we think about vision, we're often thinking about other people because we are naturally given amazing human beings who want to help the world and we want to add value to the world. If you're a value-driven entrepreneur, that's something you probably identify with. But we can't do that without looking after ourselves first and really catering to what we need. So I try and encourage people, where possible, to think about yourself and then to add the vision onto what does that mean for other people. And what that means for the people, can be as big or as small as you want. You don't have to build a business that changes the world. Although many people will have you believe that's true, you really don't. You don't have to change the world. You don't have to have this exhausting big mission. I know some, bigger entrepreneurs you see might have these mission statements that are so huge and, they are, I want to impact like 1 million people by this date. And if I don't do that, then it's this whole thing. And it's this very big facade. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Like, if you have a mission statement that you really believe in, fit with, feel with, vibe with, then great, go for it. But don't feel like you have to make one just for the sake of it and just to stick on a sales page or stick somewhere on your website so that it makes you look professional or makes you look like you know what you're doing and what's going on, because it's just not true and it doesn't have to be that way. So really lean into this idea of it can be whatever it needs to be for you, and your vision is going to change, and that's important. I think it doesn't have to be this set in stone thing, and it's important that we update our vision, right? Because we update our long-term strategy, but we can only update our long-term strategy as much as we can update our vision. So really get clear on the vision and have a check-in with this. Put it in your diary to reassess your vision every 6 months. That's what I would recommend you do. Maybe it's that you're going to listen to this episode every 6 months just to help you sit down and go through the process. Or it might be that you just sit some time in your diary and you're just going to listen to somebody talk about vision, or you're going to journal on vision, whatever it is that works for you. The other thing I want to talk about is what strategy won't fix, because this is a big one, right? So as much as I'm the biggest strategy advocate and I love strategy, there's some things that it won't fix, especially long term. So long term in your business, your strategy will not fix your culture. It won't fix you as a person. It won't fix your mindset, and it won't fix your leadership, in my opinion. Those things that I've just listed are some of the most important assets in your business, and yet they are given the least amount of time. So your strategy is so important, but if your head is not in the right place, then I can give you all the strategy in the world and it's not going to work. You have to really believe what it is you're doing and what it is you want and what the goal is. And often that comes down to, mindset. It comes down to emotional intelligence. It comes down to rewiring the brain in ways that it needs to. It might be that you need to look at your trauma. It might be that you need to really outwardly expose what is not clear for yourself. And that journey can be uncomfortable. It can be really hard and it can be really uncomfortable. And I am not qualified to talk on trauma and that kind of area, so I'm not going to. I leave that to the professionals. But what I will say is I can see it from a mile off of when people need to go and do some other work. And I'm the same, right? I'm on this journey too. So don't feel like this is some kind of pedestal of hierarchy and putting people in slots and places. This is an ongoing journey that everyone goes through. But sometimes there will be things if you can't think of your vision right now, it might be that there's things blocking you that you need to kind of deal with, and that will allow things to move forward, because inevitably we're always kind of self-preserving and denying ourselves from things that we want. So the strategy is never going to fix the vision, in my opinion. It helps aid it, and don't get me wrong, it brings clarity to the vision, because once you give, so say someone comes to me and they give me a vision, I can then create a long-term strategy off that. By me giving them a long-term strategy, often it brings the vision so much clearer into their head, and it really allows them to feel into it. So people often feel so revitalized after working together, because they're like, oh my goodness, this seems so much more achievable and it seems so much tangible, and they can see it. So it will aid the vision, but you have to really be clear on strategy itself does not fix everything. You have to do the internal work. So the other thing I wanted to touch on today was what is happening right now for you just in this moment. So I want you to take stock of do an analysis of right now, we're listening to this episode. Where are you at with this? How do you feel? How's your body feeling? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you scared? Do you feel the things she's talking about doesn't really make sense to me? Where are you feeling resistance? Because that's going to dictate to you what your next steps are from this episode. And ultimately a lot of people do have a clear vision. Some people have a very clear vision, but they have a very little strategy, or they have the complete wrong strategy. And that's, where my work comes in and where I help people, because ultimately, the long-term strategy guides that. But just having to think about what does it mean for you right now, and where are you at, will really help. One thing I wanted to touch on is talking about when you hit, and I'm going to go into this in more detail in another podcast, about goals and things, but I want to talk about when you hit the vision and what do you do then, because this is something I help people with a lot. So often, you create a vision, you create a business, and maybe you hit it. And for some people, they hit it in a year, some people hit it in 5 years, some people hit it in 10 or more. But what happens is, what do you do once you've hit the vision? Because inevitably it's never enough for most people, and that's human nature, right? We kind of hit a vision and then we're like, oh, it's not really what we want. And so I help clients to work through that and to find the new vision and to establish what it means to them to continue their work in the world. So when you hit, and for some people that's, hitting the 6-figure mark, as much as I don't particularly subscribe to that and I don't love it, and I'm quite against the whole messaging around it. Ultimately, a lot of people have that goal. It's I need a 6-figure business. I want a 6-figure business. Once I have that, I'm going to be this amazing goddess and it's going to be fab. And inevitably people get there. And often if they come and work with me for a long period of time, I can get them there much faster than it would have been for themselves. And one of the kind of repercussions of that is, oh, I've reached that. And then they have this period, it's often about a month or 2 months, can be longer, sometimes 6, where they feel so lost. They feel lost, they feel unsure, they feel kind of just not depressed, but it can really like zap the energy out of you, and it can just completely leave you feeling flat. And that's what I like to call like a quantum leap, or a kind of real resistance takeover, where the next level of you is coming out, the next kind of up level is coming, and the next like vision for you is appearing. But there's this period of time where it feels so lost and confused, and you often feel worthless. Sometimes people feel really bad, like it can get very, very deep very quickly, and that is okay. It's not okay for you in the moment, like it feels horrendous, but I just wanted to remind you all that that does happen, because I think when it happens to us, we think that no one else has ever done it or been through it or gets it. And I just wanted to remind you that that's not the case. People do go through that. And especially, say you're at the 6-figure mark, that's the mark where you're only just beginning. I think people get to that point and they're like, oh, this is it, we're here. And I'm like, no. And I'm not saying that in the terms of like, you've got to go for 1 million. I just mean, once you do the first 6 figures, that's like the starting point of things moving forward. And so that's when your long-term strategy really kicks in, because it starts again. But sometimes you need the space to breathe. So if that's you right now, just give yourself the gratitude and space to like just be, because it's hard sometimes to be in. Some people don't hit it. Some people like fly through until they get to 500,000 or 1 million or whatever. But for a lot of people, it's like that 6-figure thing's a real push. And then once they get there, it's like, oh, okay, my life hasn't really changed that much. Nothing's that different. Like, remember, the money doesn't really do much, okay? And I know people don't like when I say that. And that's coming from a place of me who hasn't had any money and comes from nothing and is not privately educated. And just so that I can really put that clear, because I know people get very unhappy when people say that. But as someone who understands money for what it is, and the fact it is an energy, but it's also incredibly useful, and that if you don't have it, your life can be really, I try not to swear, hard. It's a real thing. But I also want you to say that there is only a point where the money makes a difference. And it used to be 80 grand a year. I can't remember I don't know if that's still the case. It used to be that if people who were employed had a salary of £80,000 a year, they didn't see any more benefit or feel financially better off over that, okay? Now, I really believe that to be true. I really believe that the money is so important and we need money, and, people who dismiss that are not really at touch with what it's like to have no money. But what I do want to say to you is the money only kind of hits to a certain degree, depending on the lifestyle you want, obviously. Some people, they need the 100 grand a month because that's what their lifestyle demands of them. But for most people, you hitting 6 figures is not going to really change that much in terms of your day-to-day happiness from life, because the money isn't the problem a lot of the time. The money is just the thing that we and society hits on us that is. It's like, just buy the handbag, just buy the other thing, just buy this, buy that, have the bigger house. If we have more space, then our kids are going to be happier because we won't all be on top of each other. Like, yeah, to some degree that makes sense. But also it gets to the point where it's like, is it or is it not? So I'd really encourage you all, because that's a whole other podcast episode in itself, talking about money, but really kind of think about, the money not being, don't set the money as like this be all and end all thing, because it's unlikely that it's not going to magically fix everything. But as always, I do want to preference by saying having money is bloody lovely and it really, really helps your life. So please do not think I'm dismissing that. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about was maybe you've flew through 6 figures and you're finding that okay. But maybe you get to the 300 grand a year mark or the 400 grand a year mark, and that's when you kind of feel like, I don't know what is next for me. You might feel like things are running, you might have, got your system sorted, your operations, things might be moving in a real cool position, and you might feel like everything's kind of like moving along and it's all going pretty swimmingly, right? Obviously there's day-to-day challenges, but you're feeling overall that it's going okay. Then you need to think about, is this kind of lull might hit for you, and it might be that actually you're happy at that income level and you don't want to go for the 7 figures a year, and that's okay. And then you think, okay, what is the vision? Because sometimes once you've done, say you've done the 300k a year for like 4 years, it gets a bit boring, and it's okay to get a bit bored. I know people don't talk about this, but like, it's okay to get a bit bored. And what I'd encourage you to do is, once you hit that point, that's when your vision really needs to come into play, and it's when you really need to tap into it. You need to go into it. For some people, that might be you need to spend like a month out of the business to really allow you to understand what is your life outside of the business, because at that income level, depending on how your business design is, some of you will not be needed that much in your business, but many of you will be heavily involved in the business at that income level. And so it's time for you to shift and say, hey, what is my role here? Do I want to be a leader? Do I want to be a deliverer? Do I want to grow? Do I not? Do I want this big team? Do I want, universal impact? Like, what is the vision on that? And really leaning into that. So if you are in that position, I'd really encourage you to dig into that further and to really allow yourself to move through the motions of, I'm at multi-six figures. What does this mean? Does it mean I want to go for 7 or 8? Does it not? What does that look like? Because some of us don't want to go, okay? And you don't have to go for the 7. You really don't. And I think one thing that the human brain will trick you in is always being greedy, always wanting more, always feeling like once I get more, I'm going to be happier. But then that's where you need to learn and kind of tune into your emotional intelligence of what does that mean for you as an individual. Not as a collective, not as what some researcher at Harvard's saying. I want to know, what does that mean for you? Use the research, aid the research, but also make it specific to you and what that means. So, to round up this episode, I want to touch on the top tips I have for making your strategy simple and keeping it achievable. I think this is really key. So, one thing I can really encourage you to do is to keep your strategy as simple as possible. It does not need to be really complicated. Everything I do in business is to try and simplify it for other businesses, whether that's like a big corporate organization, which, let's face it, many of them really need to be simplified because it's complicated for no reason. Or whether that's, you're a one-man band and you're doing multi-six figures a year and you don't have any team and you like it that way and you don't want to have the responsibility of team, please keep your strategy simple. The simpler it is, makes it more achievable. The other thing I wanted to touch on with this is, what does achievable look like for you? Because there's no point in someone creating strategy with you, i.e. me, if it's achievable for me, but I'm not the one that's doing it. It's about you. And, I have a chronic illness and it affects me daily, and it means that I have very limited energy resource capacity. And that really affects me because I can't go and, if I was going to get help some long-term strategy, what someone else might write is completely different to what I can actually do. And so I want you to really think about what is achievable for you. What do you want to do? And also not pushing yourself to be in this road of it has to be this big thing. So sometimes it's just because it's achievable doesn't mean you want to do it. There's a difference between what is achievable for you and what you actually want to do. So lean into, what do you want to do? Because some people come to me and they're like, yeah, well, I could work, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's my dream week. I'm like, okay, cool. Do you want to do that? No, not really. Okay, so that's not the strategy we're going to go with. The strategy we're going to go with is 6 hours a day, 3 days a week, or whatever they decide. But really getting clear on, just because it's achievable doesn't mean that you want to do it. And think about, what do you want to do? Now, there's going to be lots of mindset stuff comes up there for you, because you're going to think, well, who am I to earn X amount of money in only this time? And, I've got to be working hard. And what are people going to say in my family if I don't work every day of my life? It's about you deciding what is right for you. And it's all about bespoke business, sustainable business, and creating a long-term strategy that is sustainable to you. And in order to create a sustainable long-term strategy, you have to give yourself the permission to think beyond the everyday and the restrictions that society and the world have placed upon us, because that's not going to serve you right now where you are. I hope this episode has been helpful. I hope it's made you think about things. I could go into this for ages and ages and ages because I absolutely love talking about vision and long-term strategy. If you have any feedback, things you want to talk about, feel free to drop me a message on Instagram, which is @may.james_, and I'd love to talk to you about this because it's really fun, and it's something that I am so passionate about and so incredibly fulfilled when people find what their vision and their long-term strategy truly is, because once you get it, there's just such a relief can come from that, and such a kind of momentum build can happen. And so if that is something you're looking for, then feel free to reach out as well if you want to talk about how I can help you with that, because it's kind of my bread and butter and what I do, and I freaking love it. So yeah, open to supporting you. Take care, and I will see you in the next episode. Keep smiling through the thunder. Bye. thanks for listening to the Honest Business Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you are subscribed, and if you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others and leave a rating and review. To catch up with all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at may.james_, where I share the raw, uncut, behind-the-scenes reality of what running multiple businesses every day truly looks like. As always, links and any resources that were mentioned in the episode will be in the show notes below. That's all for this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next time.